We welcome from Ottawa the President and Chief Executive Officer of the Canadian Centre for Drug-Free Sport, Victor Lachance. Victor, those who believe that drug testing procedures are necessary still have reason to wonder if they work as effectively as possible when incidents of this sort take place. What's your response to that?
Well, I think they have a good reason to be concerned, because when it comes to stimulants, it is not always clear that a positive laboratory test should lead to a doping infraction, and so you need a process in order to evaluate those kind of results and determine whether or not there are circumstances, whether it's a cold remedy or whether the concentration of the stimulant should be taken into account before you decide whether or not it really is a doping infraction.
Would it be simpler just to change the list of banned substances to exclude those that are found in over-the-counter medications?
Well, that probably still wouldn't give us drug-free sport. So what you want is what's in the best interest of athletes and what's in the best interest of drug-free sport. I think keeping stimulants like ephedrine on the list is the appropriate thing to do, because it could be used in pure form and it would definitely be performance enhancing. On the other hand, since we know that it commonly occurs in cold remedies, you need a system to be able to tell the difference between the two.
And how do you find a rule that differentiates between somebody who didn't know that he or she was taking it, or didn't think there was any reason to worry if they did know, differentiate between that and somebody who was fully guilty of taking it and saying the same thing as an excuse? I mean, I don't know how you write a rule to apply to both.
You don't, and you're right. I think that would be too complicated. So the rule is kept simple. Ephedrine is banned. The ultimate responsibility is that of the athlete. But then if you're able to have a system where you can look at the results in the laboratory, and if you find that, for example, if the pseudoephedrine is there in low concentrations and it is present with the other ingredients of a cold remedy, then you know that that is not likely to be performance enhancing. If anything, it might even be performance inhibiting. And under those circumstances, a panel that is charged with making that decision could very reasonably come to the conclusion that no cheating has gone on here, no performance enhancing has occurred, and therefore there's no doping infraction.
Here's another idea that might be crazy and right off somebody's wall, but as Silken did, if you state up front what you've done, what you've taken, and why, could a competitive committee not look at that and decide, okay, you're free to compete, and then say that the results stand no matter what? Could you, in effect, not be cleared before the event if you provide all this information? Well,
it's an excellent suggestion. It doesn't take you all the way home, but it would certainly put the athlete on record as to what they're taking. It would certainly put them on record as having demonstrated drug-free behavior, trying to get all the information that they can. The downside with that, of course, is if they were to increase their concentration of a stimulant, even the one that they had previously identified as being part of a cold remedy, a lab result could still show that you've got the cold remedy in you, but now you've got a concentration of stimulant 5 times higher than you would normally find in a cold remedy. So you still have to look at the results of the urine sample, but any system that you can use that informs the athlete, informs them accurately, and shows that the athlete is certainly trying to be drug-free can all be part of our way of handling stimulants, which is a difficult category to deal with.
Where does bad advice fall in a category of excuse or explanation that should be acceptable?
Okay, well, the way the system works now, unfortunately, is bad advice goes into caveat emptor. That is, consumer beware. The ultimate responsibility right now, the way the system works, rests on the athlete. If the athlete has any doubt, if the athlete wants to be absolutely sure, you just don't take anything on the day of competition. On the other hand, you would like to think that we could have a system where athletes can ask information, get as much help as they can in determining what to take and what not to take. They get colds, they get sick like everybody else. They should be entitled to treat those colds. And so we do have, for example, in Canada, you have a Centre for Drug-Free Sport. You can call up and you can get reliable information. But if at any time that information were to be erroneous, or if team officials or team physicians aren't as up-to-date or as informed, the danger still rests with the athlete, and I'm not sure that you can ever have a perfect system.
The danger for you, it would seem to me, is that this gets so complicated and so cumbersome and so difficult to deal with in a reasonable fashion, as you say you would like to do, that opinion starts to sway directly away from drug testing and starts to allow things that you don't want to allow. Do you see that danger?
Well, the way you describe it, it might not necessarily be a danger, because if we're really dealing with substances that can cause so much a harm to athletes who are quite ethical and drug-free, then I think you really want to look at whether the list is doing its job. But right now, the way things stand, I think you can put into place a system that both protects the athletes against that kind of harm and at the same time gives you the kind of drug-free sport you want. We're doing that currently in Canada. On average, we may have 10 cases of the kind that Silken is facing right now, and our system seems to work just fine. The issue here is making sure that on the one hand athletes are informed, and on the other that you have some kind of a reliable and accurate source of information that athletes can then take their responsibility seriously and ultimately make their final choice as to what to take and what not to take.
Well, it strikes me as ironic that Canadians Jim Dan Corbett and Silken Laumann are both involved in cases like this. They might almost think the system is working, as far as Canadians are meant to be proud of it, too well. You see any irony there?
Well, yes, I do, and I think that that's a legitimate perception on the part of Canadians in general, that perhaps we've gone too far. I mean, the system is working too well. But for those of us in the business, it's more a case in our view that perhaps we haven't gone far enough, and by that I simply mean that it's no longer a case now of the list, it's no longer a case of the science. What it really boils down to now is the procedures. It's the information, and it's the way that these results are then analyzed, reviewed before doping infractions are declared. That's where we don't have harmony worldwide. That's where we have, I think, a greater risk of harm coming to athletes. That's where there's still a lot of work to be done in order that we can say we have the kind of drug-free sports systems that are fair to athletes.
Victor, thank you for appearing with us.
Oh, you're more than welcome.